Alright everyone, it's official. It's no longer called the next-gen PlayStation. Sony's finally calling it PlayStation 5, and they've confirmed a holiday 2020 release window. In yet another very surprising manner of how Sony's handling their next-gen announcement, we just got a PlayStation blog post and another exclusive story with Wired.com. Now, if you remember, Wired.com got the big scoop on the next-gen PlayStation reveal in total not that long ago, so we're still waiting on press events, actually seeing tech demos, the controller, the console, actual footage from next-gen games, things like that, but Sony's not ready to show us that stuff just yet. We're still getting spoon-fed some of this information online, but that's fine. These are official details directly from Sony, so no rumors, nothing like that in this video. These are official details about PlayStation 5, and that's our first fact. It's called PlayStation 5, so Sony confirmed no code names, no next-gen console, PS5, and it's been confirmed to be targeting a holiday 2020 release window. That's very important. There's no specific date, but they're targeting 2020 holiday season, just like Microsoft is with Project Scarlet. Now, like I mentioned, Wired.com has the exclusive story here. SIE President and CEO Jim Ryan tells Wired, "It's nice to be able to say it, like a giant burden has been lifted from my shoulders," when referring to the PS5 name. The console's architect, Mark Cerny, clarifies that the ray tracing is actually hardware-based support, not at the software level, so that was a big point of contention for a lot of people when we heard about ray tracing in these consoles. It's good to see that that's hardware-based, no software-level fix. PS5 will use 100GB optical discs into a 4K Blu-ray drive, so that's something that we're finally getting now. PS4 Pro did not have that, and it was a strange omission at the time, though we learned that that was to keep the PS4 Pro's price down and to keep it at a $400 price tag when that initially launched back in 2016. Sony is changing the installation process for games and making them much more configurable. So, for example, being only able to install the multiplayer section of the game, or deleting the single-player portion after you've finished it. Basically, there's a lot more options now in terms of how you approach putting your game on the hard drive, though it's still a requirement pretty much anytime you want to play certain portions of a game. The revamped UI is going to display game information without actually booting it, so this sounds pretty exciting. So the way that they're describing it is you can see active online lobbies or single-player missions that you're working on without even starting the game. It's right in the user interface. You can see some immediate information of what you might want to get into, might want to jump into with some lobbies and friends, and you can do it right from there without even really booting the game. Even though they make a point to say that game booting is incredibly fast, but you don't even have to do that to get access to the information that you're looking for. The new controller, which has not been given a name just yet, so it's not called DualShock 5 or anything, has adaptive triggers. These can offer resistance for certain actions, and there's also programmable haptic feedback now. There's also an improved speaker, and it uses USB-C, with reportedly a larger battery, saying that it's heavier than a DualShock 4, but lighter than an Xbox One controller with the batteries inside. There was a demo that was made by Japan Studio that focuses on how the controller adapts to certain environments in games, so these are programmable options that developers can explore. So the way that this was described for this demo, going through sand felt slow, going through ice felt more slick through the thumbsticks. So that's something that developers can toy around with, and developers are just now getting access to this. So the controller prototypes apparently right now are just getting to developers, so while they may have had dev kits actually just working on, a certain clock speed or whatever, now they're actually getting access to the controller features as well. Bluepoint Games, surprisingly, also makes an indirect announcement in this article stating that they're working on a big one right now, referring to a PS5 game. So that is interesting as well. We haven't really figured out what Bluepoint's been up to. We know that it's something that a lot of fans are really passionate about because they do a lot of remasters and collections and things like that. So we're not sure what they're up to just yet, but now it looks like it's a PS5 project. And I would still assume that whatever it is would also come to PS4, but we don't have an announcement, so who knows what date this is actually targeting. But they've been toiling away at this for a while, so we may still be a year and a half, 2 years out from seeing whatever the game that they're working on actually come to retail. But there you go. Those are all the major details about PlayStation 5 that we learned today. I think it gives a much better picture of what we can expect out of the platform. I find it interesting that the controller is not named DualShock 5 just yet. I feel like that's something that they can get away with not calling it DualShock 5. That's not really something that people care that much about. So while it's great that the main hardware is called PlayStation 5, and they would have been crazy to not call it that. I know that was always up in the air, and that's usually the case for most hardware. I know we were worried about if it was called PS3, if it was about PS4, and PS4 was the dangerous one because the number 4 in Japan is considered unlucky, so that was kind of a big thing where a Japanese company is not going to call it PS4, but they went ahead and did that, so it was kind of a given that they would go with PS5, but the controller, potentially, maybe they'll try and name it something different to kind of focus on some of these new features that they're going for. The bigger battery sounds great, although we won't actually know how long the controller will last, probably up until the press actually gets a hold of these things, far beyond into holiday 2020, right before the system launches. That's usually a number that, you know, manufacturers don't hand out that far out ahead of time, but a bigger battery sounds nice. DualShock 4s obviously die a lot quicker, so that I kind of like stuck to right away, like, oh yeah, that sounds good. The UI, though, I think sounds the most impressive out of this so far, for new information at least. I mean, we've heard so much about the SSD and the immediacy. EA's chief studio officer, Laura Mealy, talks about that a little bit, how there's more immediacy. We're going back to our roots with consoles, where there's this access to the content, and you don't have to create these artificial barriers with loading screens and things like that. You know, we've discussed that before, and that's a very exciting portion of it. But this UI element, I think, also sounds really fascinating. That's something that I think a lot of people maybe didn't think would be a thing, but that seems to be a very big sticking point with this machine, and more than likely Microsoft's. You just don't have to wait for anything anymore. You have access to your information immediately. You can play your games immediately. What developers now have access to is, in all likelihood, vaster worlds that you don't have to wait to load a door, to load a certain section of the game. You know, that's the great part about it, and it seems like it's just amplified even more from what we're hearing as time presses forward. Do I find it odd that Sony's handling their next-gen announcements like this? Yes and no. Yes, because we expect press events, and we're surely going to get those, so I guess that's not a huge worry. It's not a huge concern. It's not like we're going to get articles up until the thing actually releases. We're going to see video of it. We're going to see Sony on stage talking about it. But it's not surprising, because I think this is a point where Sony and a lot of publishers, developers, people in the industry, they want to control the information that's getting out there, and so that's why so many of them are doing these direct style videos. They're doing these blog posts. They're doing press releases far beyond when we need to know this information or should know this information. And that's the thing, is that while developers and publishers are hitting the release dates, while, you know, Sony typically isn't letting out this information until they're confident that it's proper information and that it's not going to change, we learn about it so early, it seems, and I think that's because they want to avoid the leaks. They want to avoid being approached by press about all this nonsense. We're kind of leaving that age, it seems. Rumors and leaks are always a thing. You can't really avoid them, but I think they're trying to attack a lot of this stuff preemptively. And that's a big part of the controller portion. We're just now hearing that these prototypes are getting to developers. Well, that's why Sony announced it the way that they announced it. I guess this is a scenario where they didn't want to send these things out, be at developers for 3-4 months, and then the secrecy is just out of the bag, where certain developers, certain people at these studios, close connections, they start leaking out this information, and then something gets misconstrued. Maybe it doesn't have haptic feedback. Maybe it has this weird functionality that's described in a manner that Sony doesn't want it to be described that way. You know what I mean? They're controlling the information as much as possible, and despite the fact that they're doing that through the PlayStation blog or through Wired.com, they're still doing it. And I think that's the big important part here, is that they want to make sure that they convey the proper message about what PlayStation 5 is going to do, how it's going to do it, how it's going to accomplish all your needs and wants out of a game's console, and that's fine. I think that's great. Now, if we want to dispel some rumors here, we haven't had much about the controller. One really outlandish rumor was that it has a camera and a screen on it. Those were two separate rumors on a different occasion. Obviously, we're not hearing anything about that here. And there's a prototype that was handed to the journalist from Wired.com. They describe it as looking like a DualShock 4, but obviously it's a bit different. So I'd imagine it pretty much looks like a DualShock 4. It's going to have a touchpad because the system's backwards compatible, so we can expect a touchpad. Again, if that's going to be a big focus, I don't know. If it's going to have a light bar, I don't know. There's nothing really described in detail about that. But I think for now we could probably rule out that it has any of those crazy things that we've been hearing about prior, but things are always subject to change. Again, we'll probably get an actual media event in the early part of 2020, or it has to be at that point, right? Because if this thing's targeting holiday 2020, this is the real deal now. So we're going to actually start getting more information. We're going to get it more swiftly. We're going to get more details about the things that we are unsure of. Mark Cerny's obviously avoiding certain questions about the hardware that they're not ready to talk about just yet. So while they're describing the UI, they won't show it. They won't say exactly how it looks or how it's presented, just that this is the information that it will provide you when you're playing your games on a day-to-day basis. But the next generation train is full steam ahead. PlayStation 5, it's sounding great so far. I'm pretty excited, actually. I'm liking everything that we're hearing so far. I like that we're not hearing anything that's too outlandish or unrealistic or gimmicky, and I fear that there may be something like that still on the horizon that they're not talking about just yet. It seems like there's always something like that in these machines that they always try to stick in there. Like with PS3, it was 6-axis. With PS4, it was the touchpad, the light bar. But a lot of these things end up getting greater function. I just don't want matters to be complicated for developers. So while, like, the thing that we're hearing about so far is that there's a lot of things that developers can do with the controller's feedback, with this new rumble functionality and this UI element in games. It's always exciting when we see a hardware manufacturer make a really cool feature and they even demonstrate it, showing how it works. But the big caveat is that developers have to use it. And so throughout the console generation, we've seen this time and time again with certain features. They are used at launch, maybe 6 months to a year into the life cycle, and then developers kind of just stop using it altogether. And so I hope a lot of the stuff that we're hearing so far isn't like that. A lot of these things sound very usable, and I hope that's the case when we actually play this thing. But what do you think about PlayStation 5? I'm honestly surprised that I'm even up right now. This is early for me. I would sleep the whole day away if I could. If you're hearing little bell noises, that's Melissa on the ground playing with her bell. But so it's still early in the week. We still have Friday, Let's Talk PlayStation, so I'm sure we'll get more details possibly, or maybe things clarified that we can cover up there. So I know there's still a lot to actually discuss, and just the regular news week. And it's a Tuesday, so we had our normal topic video, PlayStation Now versus Xbox Game Pass, the facts and why you shouldn't really be comparing those services, so watch this video, and also watch that. And if you haven't yet, subscribe for the best PlayStation news, reviews, and updates that are here on YouTube, and you can follow me on Twitter at Mystic Ryan. That's it, though. I will see you all in the next video. You take it easy.